It's Monday, the 19th of August, and welcome to the Edinburgh Fringe. Yes, good afternoon, good morning, good evening. I'm too excited. I'm going to come in a measure early on Needfire as they bring us in to the final week of the Edinburgh Festival Fringe. I mean, I say it's the final week. The other way to describe it is there's still the equivalent of 2 entire Glastonburys to go. It's a long, old, exciting arts festival, isn't it? 2 Glastonbury. So yeah, many more shows, well over 3,000. Many more performances, well over 51,000 curtain calls. Fewer tents, although that might help the accommodation, but more of everything. When you look at the Fringe and you compare it to any of the other major cultural events in the arts calendar, it's very hard to find something as big or as impactful as this. How do you find shows in there? Well, you know the rule of 3, but for those of you who haven't heard it in the last 2 weeks or might be new around here, in which case, welcome. Choose 3 shows. The first one, choose somebody you know that you trust off the television or you've seen before or you recognise the director. Second one, something else that somebody else knows and somebody else recommends. Now, reviews are obviously a good place for this. Listening to interviews on podcasts, like that can go as well. But also somebody who's next to you in the queue. You turn around and go, what have you seen? If you're based in Edinburgh, what are your work colleagues talking about? That's your second show. And your third show, choose one at random. Now, that could be just, what's next to me in the next 45 minutes on the Ed Fringe app and website. It could be just flicking through the paper printed board and sticking your finger down. It could be just walking around Edinburgh looking at a poster and going, that's an interesting picture. I'll go and see that. What is it? When is it on? There's your 3 things. That will give you a great experience of the Fringe. If you've got a lot of time to do it or you're here for another day, just choose another 3. Simple as that. That has served me well for well over 30 years at the Fringe. 20 years doing the podcast radio show, and before that when I was at university and living here and working. Anyway, and of course, the other thing to remember is because it's week 3, do check the Act's social media pages and the websites of the venues, because there's usually a bit of shuffling in the programme. The shows that are very popular will get extra shows put on, extra dates and times. There may be shows that are cancelled and something else is going to be popping in to replace it. Or, a couple of old friend comedians just might go, you know what, we should just do a show for old time's sake. And you'll get the return of Kendall Mitchcake after however many years this Friday coming up at Zoo Southside. Just keep an eye on things. Be alert to opportunities. There are many out there. To open up our interviews here in the third week, let's speak to Nina Gilligan about her show Goldfish. We're going to start off with the classic observation about Goldfish's memory, which, we then go on to explore what that means to Nina, because it ties in to the show. We also go into the importance of the hour at the Fringe and how it's well suited to Nina's show and the topic that she wants to explore. And in a little bit of, on the regular circuit where it's 5, 10, maybe 15 minutes if you're headlining, you can't ever be as vulnerable as Nina needs to be in the show that we have here in Goldfish. Like every interview, I never want to give out too many spoilers about any show. And how many and how few is something that I check in with the artist before we start recording. And that allows me to talk about others and for the artist to let me know some details as well. So while there are no spoilers to this show, the show itself does touch on topics that may be triggering. And this interview is going to hint at those topics. So do be aware. We've got another show and another podcast out tomorrow. So if you want to skip and take care of your mental health, that's far more important. But for now, let's find out a little bit more about Goldfish, why it's important, and a little bit more about Nina herself. Joining me now, we have Nina Gilligan with a show that's called Goldfish. And I looked through the press release and went, oh, I know the joke about the goldfish. But it turns out that that's kind of the starting point for your hour at Edinburgh this year.
It is the starting point. Yeah, about goldfish and their memories. Where I'm coming from it from the point of view of perhaps these things we don't know about goldfish and how that relates to some experiences I've had.
So the joke itself, because I'm sure there are people out there who don't have my sense of humour, is the idea that goldfish have a very short-term memory.
Yeah.
How does that apply to you in the show?
It applies to me on several levels. So on one level, I have some health issues. So I have a chronic migraine, and it's a special kind of migraine. It's a sort of migraine in fancy dress that pretends to be a stroke. So you get some similar symptoms as a stroke, and migraineurs out there might recognize this. And one of the very specific symptoms is something called transient aphasia, where when you're in the midst of a migraine, you have temporary memory loss. And during that period, you will struggle to even find the simplest of words. So word recall becomes very difficult. So in the show, I go into that and we play a little game where I come out with a list of words that I have used in replacement for normal everyday items. And the audience has to try and guess what I'm getting at. So there's some very direct links to the fish reference and the goldfish and forgetting. And I also have something called fibromyalgia that affects memory, and that's called brain fog. So that's where you would go into a room and forget what you've gone in for. But there's some little known other facts about goldfish that do start to enter the show as it proceeds along. But I'm not sure, Ewan, how much of it I want to give away.
Not too much, because people can go and see the show. Let's get the plug in right now. Where can we go and see the show?
You can see the show at Subatomic, and that's a Just the Tonic venue, and it's just next door to the Pleasance at 8:40 every day.
Okay, and as always, we'll have links back in our website, edinburghfringe.thepodcastcorner.com. It sounds like quite a personal show. Putting this out there, it's exposing quite a vulnerability in yourself, I suppose.
It is.
It's also something that you can draw strength from.
Yeah, I'm hoping not only is it personal, but what's the phrase? The personal is the political. I think it's one of those things that by telling my story, I'm hoping that other people can relate to it.
Is this something that you've had in previous shows?
I did 1 year. I did a show called Broad Shoulders, and that was my debut show in Edinburgh. And that was a story about adoption, as I'm an adopted person, and how I found my birth family. But within that, I was trying to bust some adoption myths. So I always try, when I'm telling a personal story, my aim is either to raise awareness or to make people think or to allow people to relate to what is personal. Because I never really want to go for this sort of, poor me, isn't that awful, what's happened to Nina Gilligan. That isn't ever my sort of aim with a show. I just always think that in the personal, there is something that can be of value to an audience. So that's kind of where I go, and be funny, to look at it from a different angle.
What sort of a reaction are you getting from the audiences?
Oh, it's been really interesting. So I think one of the loveliest things is people have started to send me goldfish. I've had some goldfish gifts, which I just think which have been made by people, or they've found them, and not real goldfish. And please do not send any goldfish in the post. It's not allowed. The RSPCA don't like it. But I think that's a real testament to how people have been touched by it. People have started to use marigold, the goldfish in the show that I talk about. I was a goldfish in a bowl on a voiceover advert, because I do a lot of voiceover. And people have started to use marigold as a symbol of hope. And a few people just by themselves have started to use the hashtag marigold will survive. That's not something I put out there, but something other people kind of cottoned onto. So I feel like people are relating, which is great. And I've also had the feedback that they found it very funny. But the ending is it's a tough ending. It's not quite the ending because I do end on a funny, hopeful note, but there is a little bit of it that's difficult to swallow, I suppose. I say you sort of feeling like a fish. You go underwater and you have to hold your breath for about 5 minutes and then you're allowed to come up for air. So there is a point in the show that you do feel like you are a fish, I think.
So as they're about sort of the general audience reaction, what about, again, without spoilers, it's not that kind of podcast, but can you feel the audience change and can you literally see them think when you get to that moment in the show?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a tangible shift of the energy in the room where even though there's jokes in that bit, but they become quite dark jokes and some quite dark callbacks from the rest of the show. You can feel the audience shifting in their mood and also this real tension with, am I allowed to laugh now? Is this funny anymore? And some people do laugh vigorously and other people react with a kind of reverence, a kind of silent reverence. And other people are moved. Other people have been annoyed. I've had one or two reactions of, I don't think you should have done that to me. So, and in response to that, I've put a very clear warning up right at the beginning of the show to tell people that there will be this particular scene, because I didn't want people to come in and be blindsided by something heavy that really is a very small portion of the show, but I didn't want them to be triggered. But still, some people feel like, oh, this is too much for me, or it's a shock to me and not quite sure how to handle it.
Was that part always going to be in the show?
Yeah, it was. It really was. And to me, and you'll find out what it is when you come to see it, again, my reason for telling it was to make the point that women or survivors of the thing should be allowed to tell their stories in their way on any platform, in any artistic form that they wish to. And that they can speak and they don't need to be silenced, and it's their story to tell. And it's also, the whole show is about women being believed and taken seriously. And that their memories, when it comes to trauma, are generally, bar the odd miscarriage of justice, correct.
Do you know of anywhere where that message, the show, and the message that you put out through all of your comedy has had a positive effect on somebody's life?
I anecdotally have had really good chats with survivors. There's other work that I do, but it's very separate from this show. I'm trying not to conflate the two things, but this, and again, it will give away a spoiler if I talk too much about it, but the arena in which I'm talking about, I also, along with another comedian, we founded an organization that deals with this. So it's a subject that's been very close to my heart for quite a long time. And it's an underlining of my beliefs around this subject and this topic.
Did you decide to be this visible on these issues? I mean, crusade is probably too strong a word, but is this something that you've always had in your art?
No, I think it took a while for me, as in I think there's a point, there's a crossover, and I don't want to be too grandiose about this because I don't think that's who I am as an act. I think there's a crossover point where you go through a transformation where you're an act, where you go around and you do your entertainment on stage to an audience, and you try and please the audience on a Saturday night with a number of jokes that may be a persona, but really you're in service to your audience. Then at some point an act becomes an artist, where then their agenda slightly moves into another territory where you're trying to create something original on your own terms that has something in it, something authentic, and has something that is new and comes from you and is a culmination of your experience and your craft. And that takes time. I think the circuit doesn't allow you to do that straight away. I think it happens gradually over a number of years, and it takes a risk, it takes bravery, it takes confidence. And, you know, it's a difficult thing to do. And I'd like to think over time that I'm stepping towards that. That's where I'd like to be.
Is that why the hour show that everybody faces at Edinburgh, is that why this is so incredibly well suited to this topic?
100%, Ewan. I think that's when you see these hour shows in Edinburgh and these debates on why is an hour different? What does it give to an act? It allows an act to create a piece of something that is closer towards an artistic endeavour. And that's what Edinburgh gives an act. It allows you to exercise the full range of what you are or what you have to say. And that's why, you know, it does take time to do that. And why it's frightening and it's scary, and people get very anxious and upset and nervous because it's a very vulnerable place to put yourself. And it should be treated with respect.
How do you take care of the audience at the end of the show then?
So I decided originally it's been through several iterations. Originally I ended on that difficult place. And I had discussions with a friend, Dave Longley, who he's been helping me, and we decided that we would change the ending. So I now end on a slightly absurdist note, but I don't want to give it away, which brings the audience back into a place of play and fun and joy, so that we can just take a moment to recover and to remember that, you know, that we're okay.
And
we're okay.
That's important to you, that simple message at the end of it is going to be okay.
Yeah, hope, I think.
So the show itself, as you said, Goldfish, remind us once more where it's on.
It's on at Subatomic, next door to the Pleasance, 8:40. Yeah.
We will have a link, as always, to that back at our website, edinburghfringe.thepodcastcorner.com. Are there any other materials or sort of resources that go along the show that people can find online?
Yeah, I mean, I would, again, we are completely separate in this, but I think what I'll do is you can go to my website at ninagilligan.co.uk. I will put a list of resources that will be helpful to people there that have come to the show and want to find out a little bit more about what we do as an organisation, or if they've felt affected in any way and they'd like some more support.
We'll have a link back to that website as well. Nina, thanks very much for your time. Thank you so much, Ewan. Nina Gilligan there, talking about her show Goldfish. It's being at Just Atomic Nucleus 2040 all the way through to the 25th of August. As always, ticket links on our website, edinburghfringe.thepodcastcorner.com. The Fringe is nearing an end, but it's a very, very long run to the end. All of this week, another Saturday, Sunday, many of the shows coming in for Monday as well. There's a lot of Fringe to get through. There's a lot of flavour to bring to you on the podcast radio show that we have here. So I will do my best to bring that to you. And if you do enjoy what's happening here, the usual link, like, love, shares and subscribes are always welcome. I'll catch you around Edinburgh, at the Fringe or beyond. But ta-ra for now. You've been listening to the Edinburgh Fringe Show, hosted by Ewan Spence, produced by Spence Media and Radio 6 International. Listen to more at edinburghfringe.thepodcastcorner.com.